And good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, everybody. 9 a.m. on the East Coast, 6 a.m. on the West Coast on this Saturday, January 21st of 2023. This is a VPartySports podcast with Vasu Vadaparty. You can reach me at VPartySports on Twitter and Instagram and on Facebook and YouTube at Vasu Vadaparty. All right, a big day in sports. We'll recap a little bit of Friday's NBA, NHL, a couple of NCAA games to go over, but a big day in sports, college basketball. Wall-to-wall college basketball conference play everywhere from west to east, east to west, starting at noon Eastern, all the way through midnight, probably through midnight for the last set of games out here on the West Coast where I am. The NBA with 7 games tonight. The favorites went 2-5 on Friday. I give you my NBA best bets at 11 a.m. Eastern on the Daily Post. And then, of course, if you missed any of the information, we'll get you the replays right up until noontime, right up until tip-off, right up until kickoff this afternoon, 4:30, when the NFL starts. Of course, there's NHL games, 2 NHL games Friday night, a full slate in the NHL today. In fact, let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 games in the NHL tonight. So all but 2 teams are playing hockey today in the NHL. The first one starts at 12:30 Eastern with the Anaheim Ducks visiting Buffalo. The NBA starts off at 5 o'clock Eastern with the Boston Celtics and Toronto Raptors. That's the first of 7. And then college basketball, as we said, starts all day today. It'll start at noon Eastern, and that'll go with 5 games. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 games at 12 o'clock, 1 at 12:30, and then the crux of the schedule gets going at 1 o'clock with TCU and Kansas, the big one early. And then a monster game at 2 o'clock between UCLA and Arizona. All that and more coming up on the VParty Sports Podcast with Vasu Vadaparty. You'll see the tickers go across at the bottom with the NFL lines, the NBA lines as well, and then the college lines will follow with the hockey lines as well. All right, so here we go. We know what day it is. It's divisional weekend. It's the NFL. The lines for the game, as they've been updated just now, the lines for the game are Kansas City has gone up from 9 to 9.5. The total is 53. That's wavered a little bit from 52.5 to 53.5 to 53. 9.5, the line has gone up. And don't you think the odds makers know what's going on here? That game that they played earlier, they played a game earlier this year, and I want to look up the date here real quick. Kansas City played Jacksonville way back on November 13th. It was a 27-17 victory. Patrick Mahomes threw 4 touchdowns. That game started out at 10.5. It went to 10, and then it ended up at 9.5 right before kickoff. Don't you know these odds makers know what they're doing? So they're not putting this game at 10 for people to take Jacksonville and maybe get a push out of it. We all saw what happened last week in Jacksonville against the Los Angeles Chargers. But 9.5 for Kansas City, 53 the total. The game stayed under the first time they played. Jacksonville was in the midst of their struggles after that game. They went to 3-7. Kansas City 7-2. Of course, now they are 14-3 as they'll host Jacksonville. The miraculous comeback last week versus the Chargers. The Chiefs end up 14-3. Today's weather, 38 degrees and cloudy. Everybody knows what's going on with Jacksonville. It all starts and ends with Patrick Mahomes for Kansas City. Their defense has been so-so, but the number one offense in the NFL takes shape today against the Jacksonville team, who's been hot. They won 5 in a row to get in the playoffs, actually. They've been in playoff mode ever since they had to win and get in every week. And they did, winning the last game against Tennessee. And then the final game, Tennessee, Houston Texans, the Jets. They beat the Cowboys. They beat the Titans. And the Lions on December 4th were the last game that they had lost. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5-game winning streak to close the season. And then the playoff win, the miraculous playoff win, is a 2.5-point underdog last week at home against the Los Angeles Chargers. They win that game 31-30 on a Riley Patterson 36-yard field goal. So that's what we've got going on. The weather, 38 degrees by kickoff and cloudy for Kansas City for Arrowhead Stadium all over Missouri. 4:30 Eastern the game, 1:30 Pacific on NBC, 3:30 for all of you in the Midwest. Okay, we get on to the next game. The Philadelphia Eagles, 14-3. They have the 1 seed. They're playing the Giants for the 3rd time this year. Division rivals. 9-7-1 for the Giants. Who knew that tie was going to come into play for the New York Giants when they tied the Washington Commanders? They ended up with that tie. They ended up having a one game ahead of Seattle and Detroit in the loss column. Giants lost to Detroit. That would have eliminated them. And then Seattle beat Detroit, and that would have eliminated Detroit if it ended up being a three-way tie. I believe Seattle had the round robin figures for that, but that's not the case now. Giants with a big win at Minnesota last week. They come up with Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley, big games last week for the New York Giants. To get the box score here real quick to make sure we get the right numbers here. Excuse me, 9 a.m. in the morning here. The box score, Daniel Jones, 301 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. He found the receivers that he needed. Isaiah Hodgins has become a big-time receiver for Daniel Jones. Barkley, 53 yards rushing. But who led the team in rushing last week? I say, who led the team? Daniel Jones, 78 yards on 17 carries. A lot of designed runs for the New York Giants there. 1 touchdown for Hodgins, 1 touchdown for the rookie tight end Bellinger. They beat up on the Vikings defensively as well. They didn't get to Cousins in terms of sacks, but they hit him. They hit him a lot in that game, and they're going to have to try and figure out a way to contain Jalen Hurts. Wink Martindale, the defensive coordinator for the Giants, says he's got something designed for Jalen Hurts, unlike what they did the first time they played him when they got beat 48-22 and barely hung on in Week 18. Remember, Week 18, the Giants were already in. They didn't play anybody. No Daniel Jones, no Saquon Barkley, no receivers, and they barely hung on to lose to Philadelphia 22-16. They covered the 13.5 or 14.5, I believe it was. Let's make sure I got that right. I think it was 14. Actually, it went up to 17. 43 was the total. The game stayed under, but in terms of the box score, Davis Webb had 168 yards. Lawrence Cager rushed for 69 yards. So guys that don't normally play were playing. Gary Brightwell had 60 yards, so no Barkley, no Hodgins, no Daniel Jones, and yet they lose 22-16 to the Eagles, who had everybody in that game. Hurts had 229 yards, didn't throw a touchdown. Giants defense has played well the last few weeks. They held the Vikings to 24, the Eagles to 22, the Colts to 10. They lose to the Vikings 27-24. That was a Greg Joseph field goal. But everybody had a feeling the Giants were going to come back against Minnesota. And Minnesota was on upset alert. And then the previous Sunday, they only allowed 12 points to the Washington Commanders, a game that would turn out to be huge for them in terms of tiebreakers for the playoffs. So that's your Saturday setup for this weekend. The Kansas City Chiefs and the Jacksonville Jaguars, 9-53, 9.5 and 53 for Kansas City. The Eagles, 7.5 and 48. Don't forget, best bets coming up. Best bets with the Daily Post coming up at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific time. 5-0 for me in the NBA Friday. That gives me a total of 14-4 for the week in the NBA. Overall, 14-4. Overall, 29-11 in the NBA since January 1st. So that's over 70%. Don't have the exact calculation, but 29-11 in the NBA. I know Saturday's a big day in college basketball. I'm 7 games under in the NCAA going into today, going into this weekend. It's a big college basketball day, but I'm very confident get that back. It's all 7 losses that I'm under 500 are from this week. So that's going to change today. Hopefully it doesn't get worse, but I've got some good plays for you today on the Daily Post at 11 a.m. Eastern. So Kansas City, Jacksonville, the Philadelphia Eagles, and the New York Giants. By the way, the New York Giants, one more thing about that before we go. 22-16 in Week 18. 15 opportunities before this. I want to thank Russell Baxter, ProFootballGuru.com, and football, seriously, for giving me this number. 15 times where a team has swept its opponent 3 times, division rivals, out of 24 opportunities. So we don't have the numbers against the spread for that, but that includes the 49ers last weekend against Seattle. They're number 15 of the 24 times that it's had. All right, when we come back, we will hit the NBA, we'll hit the NHL, and we'll get you going for this Saturday on the 21st of January, early in the morning Saturday, a little after 6:15 on the West Coast, 9:15 on the East Coast. VParty here with you on the VParty Sports Podcast. Back in 1 minute.